Welcome to REST, which stands for Resiliency and Empowerment Seminar today. I am your host, Susan Gans, and I am the founder and strategic advisor with Gans Strategic Solutions, where we operate at the intersection of business and human behavior. This show is about hearing from leaders of small and mid-sized businesses and nonprofits. We hear about their journeys, we hear about their organizations, and very importantly these days, we hear about how they are being resilient. I am so delighted today to have our guest, Chris Kunze. Chris is a multilingual data scientist with over 15 years of experience predicting employee performance, retention, and safety, assisting hundreds of companies all over the globe implement screening assessments and leadership surveys. He uses machine learning algorithms to build and validate predictive models so new candidate and employee data can be scored effectively and accurately through custom interactive applications. He is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Marquette University with a liberal arts degree. Kunze also completed studies in philosophy at the Gregorian University in Rome, Italy. He was a recruiter throughout Europe and worked for 3 years as a student counselor at the Albertus Magnus University in Cologne and the Heinrich Heine University in Dusseldorf, Germany. He is the president of Kunze Analytics, LLC. He recently worked for 4 years in R&D at John Wiley and Sons Workplace Learning Solutions Division. And while he was there, he leveraged governmental workforce and client data to publish a library of 139 job-related performance models for PXT Select certified partners and their clients. He is known for estimating ROI before modeling implementation using what's called the venerable BCG utility formula. Finally, Kunze is a certified consultant with Frontline Systems, Inc., the premier creator and distributor of optimization, simulation, and data mining software. So that's a mouthful. We are going to have a lot to talk about, Chris.
Well, thank you so much for reading through that, Susan. Glad to be here.
So let's get into the conversation. Take us back to the early days of your career. How did you get into the whole human resources, optimization, data analytics field?
Sure. So I found myself as an instructor in a training center in Germany many years ago, and students came from 8 different countries. So I would meet with them for a half hour twice a month just to see how they were doing. A lot of them were homesick. They didn't understand the language. You know, they had to cope with being in a different culture and very challenging studies. So I found that there was an assessment used in France in the Sorbonne University that had 8 different temperaments, like a half of a Myers-Briggs, right? And so in the first year of dealing with them, and it was a 2-year program, I really tried to understand their personalities. And in doing so, I could adapt my communication style. And then I just saw that that was so useful. Years later, I came back to the States. I went to a career coach. They had me take an assessment, and the publisher of that assessment saw my scores and asked if I wanted to become a dealer of their software in Wisconsin, and I ended up doing that. And it was a 15-year stay working at corporate headquarters, and then beginning to service clients around the world to implement psychometric testing.
And it's so important to understand how we handle behaviors and what are innate sort of coping mechanisms. So what have you learned over the years about human behavior and how people adapt? Are there any general guidelines, tips that you can share with us?
Yes, I would say that people need to know that they are extremely resilient. And if they can just have more confidence in themselves and understand their comfort zones, when they're asked to do a task that brings them out of that and they have to use more psychological energy, they should leverage that aspect of the task that most excites them, that gives them some type of an impulse. And so we see, when I look at the profiles of people in sales and service divisions, software development engineers in the medical field, they are expected to do a lot of things, and there's performance that they're tracked on. And many times it affects their compensation, whether they're promoted or not. And I'm always amazed by seeing the different types of people that can get the job done in different ways.
So I think what you're saying is really leveraging those inner strengths and also finding ways that they can apply those inner strengths to the task that they are given. Is that correct?
They need to, yes, they absolutely need to have the freedom to be able to use their unique talents, and not everyone's going to do the same task the same way. And so management and leadership needs to realize that. Give people the freedom and empower them to be responsible and mature, grow in their career, use the different skills, cognitive abilities, personality traits, occupational interests, soft skills that they may have learned to do what they're expected to do.
Yeah, so you just anticipated my question about empowerment. So it's really about giving people the responsibility and recognizing that they're mature enough to do the tasks and to leverage their interests. So let's go back to talking about resiliency, because you said that, to be confident in oneself. Can you talk about resiliency?
Yes, I'd like to say that it's a concept that we all saw in that TED Talk, Angela Duckworth, and there are many books written about it. I've worked with several test publishing companies that actually have some type of a psychometric construct that measures resilience. It's a multi-dimensional type of the personality. So what it is kind of elusive. And it depends upon, in different organizations, it could be different things. To be resilient and effective in a company that has 10,000 employees and is global, and your manager might be in a different city, headquarters might be in a different country, resiliency and surviving in that organization and might look a little bit different than starting a company in, a place where you've lived your whole life. So it's a little more elusive, I think, than people believe. It's related to what success looks like professionally, and then which traits are going to correlate with that. And these relationships are nonlinear. They're highly complex. So, it has to do with someone's attitude towards the world, toward work, towards others. It's also going to have an aspect of the sense of urgency with which they attack different work tasks during the day, that urgency. And then there's also, a little bit of optimism. So even if they get some type of rejection, or there's a longer period of time in accomplishing what they need to do, that can like roll off their back like water on a duck, right? Okay, that's fine. It didn't go exactly the way I thought it was, but we're going to push forward. Has to do with perseverance, has to do with a stability of consciousness. So there are many assessments that measure neuroticism, right? Neuroticism, being anxious and all of that. And, as people get older, they tend to be a little more jaded and have a little less patience, right? They have more wisdom.
Yes.
They've done things before. It's not their first rodeo. So also resilience has to do with how old you are.
Never thought about
So
it like that, in
yeah,
terms of age. I'm curious about personally, how are you being resilient during these times?
how am I being resilient? That's a great question. Well, I've restarted a consulting firm over 3 years ago that I had 20 years ago, and then a corporate career in between. And the resiliency has been to learn how to do everything myself. I was used to having clerical support, accounting support, sales and marketing support, um, other PhDs to bounce ideas off of, meetings to go to. That's all gone. So now I'm working and doing this all myself. And then when I have larger projects that require other consultants and experts in their area, of course we team up. But it's not that same type of situation. So resilience for me is getting the message out, and then I've been very busy in developing some new data science projects, products and solutions. So these are an innovative way to serve clients that use test data in their pre-screen process and also for coaching. So the resilience has been to always think, what's the next solution that I could create that would have value for people using these type of instruments.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're finding ways to innovate, continuing to innovate, continuing to learn. So, along the way in your career, I would imagine that you've had some mentors and sponsors along the way. Can you talk about the role of mentors and sponsors and have they changed over time?
Yes, they have. They have changed over time based upon where I was and where I was working. So I remember one. He was a supervisor. His name was John Apple. I was at Profiles International at the time. He was a wonderful gentleman. He taught us how to understand the client's needs using something called spin selling from Neil Rockman, situation and so forth, problems and needs and all of this. What are the implications of uh, for our client if we don't solve this problem? So he got me thinking, and then two things he did. He said, Chris, I would like you to study the whole topic of return on investment for our industry. And he allowed me to purchase books, and then right away he put me presenting at seminars, getting in front of people to communicate the knowledge that I'd gained. He also asked me, and we were a team of between 20 and 30 executives implementing software throughout the globe. He said, Chris, I'd like you to adopt some new technology, test it out, see if it works, and then give a presentation to the rest of the team, and we'll decide whether we purchase the software for the whole company or for our division. And that was really nice because he knew that I had an inclination towards that. And he always saw where the next challenge was to bring that out of me, but was just so supportive. Right now, I have a executive coach who's also in the same industry. He's down in South Carolina. His name is Wayne Outlaw, and his consulting group is the Outlaw Group. He's a great, wonderful gentleman. He's a national speaker and author. His books in several languages, expert in the staffing and recruitment industry. So I have a call with him on a weekly basis. We start out with a group of 7 of us that are all in the same industry around the country. We have a networking meeting, and then inevitably we'll have a call later on in the morning, or sometimes we'll postpone it for the next week. But we have very many meetings, phone calls. He's always shooting me articles. Did you see this? This would be helpful. And we're teaming up also. So I'm a data scientist. I offer him support for his consulting firm. But it's just really a wonderful relationship. He's about a little over 10 years older than I am, and a font of knowledge and just a joy to know.
That's so great that you have a support system as an entrepreneur because you are not necessarily alone. You are have a sounding board of your own personal board of directors, so to speak, that are in the same industry who could give you perspective. So that's wonderful. I always would talk to colleagues and clients about developing those sorts of relationships or personal board of directors to help you in navigating your career and your business. So glad to see you doing it in your life. So a question for you is, if you were to go back to your younger self, speaking of advice, what advice would you give to your younger self with the perspective that you have now?
Yeah, with the perspective I have now, I would say that I tell myself um, to read more uh, read more books in different a variety of fields. There was a time where quite a good period of time where I just read books that were related to work, and it was difficult for me to turn off work. Right, I was always thinking on a Saturday morning, I'd grab a cup of coffee and I'd be at the computer and I'd be tinkering and so forth. It's like I could never turn it off. And so if I would just say to myself, hey, relax, you know, spend a little more time with the family and allow the subconscious to solve those problems. You don't always have to be thinking about them. Let it come a little more naturally, instead of trying um, to force it. And then to enjoy other literature. Earlier in my life, I learned different languages, and I lived in Europe for 14 years. So I would frequently read, books in Spanish, German, and Italian. And I kind of stopped that 20 years ago. Maybe newspapers, yes, and things like that. But it was always work related or the news. So I would say enjoy life a little bit more and stop and smell the roses.
So I'm going to repeat that. Enjoy life bit more, spending more time with family and reading on a variety of subjects, because that also expands your mind and gives you ideas actually for your main business that you might not have thought about before. And that seems to me also good advice from a self-care perspective. So, in closing, what would you like people to remember about our conversation today?
I'd like them to remember that resilience is something that everyone has, and that they don't need to look to other people as much as they need to just look inside themselves, and to find that inner voice, that silent place, and then just to think about how I can do this in a way that is going to excite that passion and give me the energy to go through something that right now seems difficult.
That is excellent, excellent advice. So resilience is something that everyone has. So don't look at the outside, look at the inside, and excite, and I'll add ignite the passion to go through uh, whatever challenge you're facing. So, Chris, how can people find you? Because we want them to find you.
It's very easy. You can see my company logo. It's just kunzeanalytics.com.
So kunzeanalytics.com, and Kunze is spelled Kunze. Chris, it's been a pleasure to speak with you and to hear about your journey. And to our audience, take Chris's words to heart about resilience is something that we all have and can tap into. And also to our audience, we look forward to the next conversation.